If you're thinking of selling your property in Spain, before you even sign that contract, watch this video, because it's not really about your sales price. It's about what you keep after paying taxes, costs, and avoiding the pitfalls that most vendors don't see coming to them. So today, I'm joined by a top property lawyer, Andrea Muro. She's gonna walk us through the taxes, the costs, the pitfalls, the things you guys need to know before you embark on the journey of selling your property in Spain. Are you guys ready? Let's go. Andrea, welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored to be here today.
It's amazing. Like, we wanted to do this video because we haven't really done this video before on the channel. So, there's a lot of people that, view our channel as a tool. They're maybe buying or selling property in different parts of Spain, and they use our High Homes channel as a resource to understand, the process, the systems, and we haven't covered this topic, selling, right? So, Andrea, for those of our audience right now that are sort of watching this video, could you give us a brief introduction to who it is we're talking to?
Thank you very much. I am a tax and property law here in La Costa del Sol in Marbella, and we walk along with our clients in every purchase and every sale of their properties in Spain.
So, Andrea, what I want to be covering today with you, so it's just for the people at home, so they know what we're going to be covering. We're going to be covering the reality of selling a property in Spain versus what people imagine. It's a lot of people don't really understand the process. We're going to talk about the hidden costs and taxes.
Important.
We're going to talk about the legal pitfalls, and then we're going to talk about practical steps to prepare the sale of the property. Because, it could be that someone's planning to sell next year, and we can talk about things that they might want to do before they sell in order to, save costs or save taxes.
Perfect.
Right? So that sort of brings me to my first question is, what's the sort of first thing that someone should, know about when they sell their property in Spain?
Selling a property in Spain entails usually the current legal phases, the reservation, the private contract, and completion. But many sellers are unaware of all the fiscal implication, taxes, cost, or even the documentation that is required for completion and property law regulations.
I mean, even for clients that I've known that, been on the Costa del Sol for years, they come to us and say, hey, after enjoying a property for 10 years, they want to sell their property. And sometimes they can be surprised on, the costs and the taxes. Let's maybe start with the costs, or taxes. Generally speaking, if you have to make a bullet point list of the costs and taxes sellers need to affront in Spain, what would they be?
Yes, they will be, especially regarding taxes, which is what we are all concerned about and we should be paying attention. The first one is the plusvalía tax. The second one is the capital gain tax. And then there are some fees that every sale includes, which is the agency's fees, the legal fees, and some other costs that are administrative costs for certificates or for mortgage cancellations for every single sale.
Okay, so in a moment, we're going to dive deep into what those costs are. So we'll make a list of them and people will be able to make a note of that. But now tell us about the sort of process, step by step. First of all, how long does it take to sell a property in Spain? And what are the normal sort of steps a vendor should take?
Well, there is not a concrete timeline. The timeline will be agreed between the seller and the buyer depending on their availability to put their money and to sell the property. Therefore, this is an agreement that needs to be done first when you actually agree on the price, and the timeline is essential for this. For this, the first step is the reservation contract. The reservation will entail putting the property out of the market. Then the second step is the private purchase contract, where you put 10% of the price, you will receive it as a seller, and the Arras contract will set all the conditions for completion. Completion is the last step of every sale and purchase. This entails signing a title deed in front of the notary and transferring the property finally.
So basically, the sale is completed when you sign at notary.
The sale, yes, but then you will have to pay the taxes and check that all documentation is duly registered. Okay,
so a very interesting topic is the one on sort of reservation and contract. So the reservation and private purchase contract are private documents that are signed between the vendor and the seller. the vendor and the buyer before completion. Talk to us about, the commitments, like the level of commitment from the buyer and the seller in the different stages. It's not the same to sign a reservation, which is more of a, very weak document. We call it a weaker document. And then you have the private purchase contract that is a bit of a stronger document. How are vendors protected in the events of, a buyer pulling out, for example, from a reservation contract compared to a PPC contract?
Yes, you are completely right. It is very different, a reservation contract than a private purchase contract. The private purchase contract may be different, but usually for properties, what we sign is an Arras contract. This means a penalty deposit that buyers are setting, and that will entrain also an obligation for sellers to comply in the time frame and with the conditions that are set in the private contract. For example, a 10% of the price is put on the escrow of usually the lawyer of the seller, and if the seller doesn't comply with the time frame or with the documentation that is required in the private purchase contract, they are risking to lose another 10% of the price, meaning that they will have to refund the deposit they receive and pay double.
So that's the way of the vendor sort of staying in line.
Exactly.
Right? So if you as a vendor sign a private purchase contract with Arras, and then you decide that you've changed your mind or whatever, you need to return 10% plus double.
Plus double.
That's a heavy penalty. And in the reservation stage, that is not normally the case, right?
It's not normally the case. It will also depend on the agreement between the seller and the buyer. The buyer can also condition the 6,000 euros usually, or 10,000 euros deposit, to be refunded double in case the vendor doesn't want to continue, which sometimes is good for the vendor to also comply with the buyer, and sometimes it's not interesting. We will have to study exactly the case.
So we recently had Yuri, which is our listing manager, on the channel, and we talked about the process of selling a property. In your experience, as a lawyer that's represented so many people selling and buying it in Spain, what do you see as a normal time frame from reservation to completion? What's the normal sort of, how many weeks, what's the normal thing in Costa del Sol?
I would say that the minimum should be 1 month. And this will help, especially lawyers, to do a proper due diligence, to study completely the case of the property, the debts, the mortgages, the urban situation, which is key. And for that, we will require some certificates that will be provided by the town hall that entrains a couple of weeks. So in order to have a safe purchase and sale, I would say that the bare minimum is 1 month.
Okay, so let's get into the meat. Let's get into the details. Let's go into the actual, I think we should separate it into costs of sale and taxes, right? So could we talk about the costs and what those are? So we'll put them on the screen for our audience.
Yes. The cost of every sale will be, first, the agencies that are usually here in the Costa del Sol, 5% plus VAT. The second is legal fees, which is usually 1% plus VAT. And then you will have some other administrative costs, which will entrain the energy certificate and the community of owners certificate. At least that is the minimum.
So in addition to that, so normally when you buy a property, you need to pay notary and registry fees when you buy a property. That's the buyer's cost.
That's the buyer's cost.
But the vendor doesn't have to pay notary or registry fees, is that correct?
Unless you are going to cancel your mortgage on the property, you don't need to. But of course, if there is a mortgage on your property, it is on the seller's side the responsibility to cancel it correctly and sell the property without any charge or encumbrances.
So we've got the 5% lawyer fee, 5% agency fee, 1% lawyer fees, and then sort of various costs associated. So those are the costs of sale. What would you say, what are the taxes?
The taxes to every seller is, as we have mentioned before, the plusvalía, which is a local tax, meaning that plusvalía tax will be applied all over Spain, but every local and municipality will have a different rate. So you need to be very certain on which is exactly the rate of your town hall, meaning that Estepona has a 30%, Marbella has a completely different rate, Mijas has a different rate as well as Albacete, Catalunya or Galicia. But that is for sure a tax that will be paid. It is based on the cadastral value of the property and the increase of the value that the town hall consider your property has had during your property
regardless
timeframe.
of the sales price?
Yes.
So basically,
nothing to do.
so even if you sell at a loss or you sell at a profit, you're still going to be
Well,
paying.
actually, I don't want to be boring with the calculation and arithmetics, but there are like two ways of considering. One is based on the cadastral value, and one is like direct and indirect way of considering. So the most beneficial tax, that is the result, will be applied for the seller.
Beneficial to the seller or to the town hall?
To the seller.
Okay.
With this, I mean that the town hall has two ways to consider the plusvalía. One is the direct, based on the cadastral value, and another one is the indirect, based on the cadastral value with some arithmetics on the profit you have made. So finally, the most beneficial one for the seller, meaning that the minimum tax and the minimum amount that result from that is the one that will be applied.
Plusvalía. Okay. And what's, I mean,
it's a difficult tax to be calculated, definitely.
In my entire career, like I remember once, like, you know, the first time I was posed with plusvalía, it was maybe in my early days of real estate, and I had this client that sold a property at a loss. And I remember the lawyer at that transaction saying, you need to pay plusvalía. And I was a young real estate agent, and I said, plusvalía, but he's selling at a loss, and plusvalía, you know, should
is
mean,
on the, yeah.
Yeah. So then it was the first time that I was sort of introduced to this formula, and even to this day, it's not a big tax.
It's
normally,
not a
like,
big tax.
I mean, I've seen normally, you know, the maximum I've seen are maybe a few thousands of euros, depending on the property value. But yeah, just an interesting thing. Tell us about capital gains tax, which is, I mean, I think capital gains tax is what people are most afraid of, right? Because it's the big chunky tax.
Exactly.
Tell us
this
about
is the big one. Capital gain tax is calculated on the net profit you're doing with the sale of your property. Meaning that in order to set rounded figures, if you bought for 100,000 euros and you are selling for 200,000 euros, you're going to have a net profit of 100,000 euros. On that net profit, the tax is going to be calculated. Of course, on that net profit, you will be able to add to the purchase price some of the invoices like notary, registry, or your legal fees. And from the selling price, you will be able also to deduct some of the fees, like the agency's fees, the legal fees, and some fees that will be required for every purchase and sale, okay?
So in easy terms then, imagine that, I'm making this up, right? You buy a property for 100,000, you sell for 200,000, and you've had 50,000 euros of costs going in and going out. That would mean that you're going to pay tax on 50,000, is that correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
On the net profit that you're actually doing.
Okay. And how does that work then? How do you calculate the percentages?
The percentages are calculated. It really depends. It really varies if you are a resident, a non-EU resident, or a non-resident out of the European Union.
Okay.
So this is very important here in the Costa del Sol because currently we have many British people who will be paying as a non-EU residence tax.
Okay, so let's start with, for example, me. I'm a Spanish resident, but even if I was like, you know, from anywhere in the world and I was living in Spain and I sold my property, what would be my capital gains tax?
It will be calculated on the net profit, depending on the rest of your global wealth. There is a rate between 19% and 28%.
Okay, so 19 to 28%.
That is for residents in Spain.
Okay, and what's the other two?
The other two is for non-residents. And here we need to difference the non-EU residents that will be paying a flat rate of 19% and non-residents out of the European Union that will be paying a flat rate of 24%.
So non-residents from the EU could end up paying less than residents that live in Spain.
Yes.
That's incredible.
That's incredible, but it also depends on your global wealth.
Yeah, okay. So, Andrea, we've covered sort of, you know, the timeline, the costs, taxes, the different kind of taxes. Talk to us about sort of, you know, what needs to happen, you know, pitfalls, mistakes people make, what to prevent. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, you know, over to you.
Yes, I would say that in every sale, the most important thing is planning ahead. You need to plan ahead in terms of which will be the tax implications, the residency status you have, the documentation to be collected, and the certificates to be updated at the time. And with this, I mean that even before you put your property in the market, what will be required is for you to have a conversation with your lawyer, with your tax advisor, in order to exactly determine which will be your net profit, the taxes to be paid, and everything in order to prevent any kind of risk in the sale.
And now on to sort of, we talked about, selling and making sure that, that you cover all your costs and make sure that your taxes are well calculated. But what's the, the timeline from the title deed until the property actually being registered as sold? How does that work? Because, you need to sign a title deed, but you also need to take the deed to notary, to the registry, correct?
Yes, exactly. First, as we have mentioned, reservation contract, private parties contract, and completion in the notary. But then there is the procedure of paying the taxes. You need to consider that when you are a non-resident, the buyer is going to retain some of these taxes to be paid directly to the tax authority.
On your behalf.
On your behalf.
So basically they retain it from you and they pay it to the Agencia Tributaria, which is the Spanish tax authority, on your behalf.
Exactly.
Okay.
You need to consider that this money is a retention, meaning that it will not come to your account once the property is sold. And maybe you will have some capital gain tax higher to be paid, or maybe we can also claim some of this 3% that has been retained to be paid back from the tax authority.
Okay, so in easy calculations then, imagine that we go down the same route as before, right? So you are a EU non-resident and you buy for 100,000, you sell for 200,000 and your costs are 50,000, right? You're going to be taxed on 50,000. Just calculate sort of live here and we'll put it on the screen. So I should pay 19%, right?
Yes.
On 50,000, which is 9,500 euros.
Exactly.
Right? Now, if I sell for 200,000, I'm going to get a retention of 6,000.
3%, exactly.
Which means that even though the buyer has paid 3% to the tax authorities, when I go and do my declaration, I will need to pay an additional 3,500.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, and on the other way around. For example, if you are making no profit on the sale of your property, still the buyer is going to retain 3% on the selling price. And still, the buyer will pay this 3% to the tax authority, regardless that you have had no profit and that you will have to pay no tax.
So basically, this is a way for the tax authorities to grab you. Basically, like, just in case you go off.
Exactly. The money will stay here in Spain, and we will make sure we take this money.
Yeah.
But if you have to pay no tax, and still the buyer has the obligation to retain and pay this 3%, we as lawyers are going to claim this 3% to the tax authority back for you to be refunded.
And in the event of you being refunded, what's the time frame to get paid?
Usually it's 12 months, maximum.
12 months, that's quite long, eh?
It's long.
If
it usually in trains shorter, but the tax authority, it's prevented to...
Tax officer, when you need to pay fast. But when they need to pay you, they pay slow.
Of course.
So, there's something, Andrea, we've talked about this on the channel a few times, right? And for us, it's really, really important that clients understand, both buyers and sellers understand all the taxes and costs and process before even embarking on the journey. And, selling costs are one of the ones which are overlooked a lot, and especially even if you're a buyer and you're going to be selling in 10 years' time, I think buyers need to know what the costs are because it makes a big difference. Costs going into a purchase in Spain can be, 9 to 13%, and then going out could be up to 10%.
Yes.
So like if it's a short-term investment, mid-term investment, or long-term investment, I think it's really important people understand the cost. And having said all of that, I want to sort of finish by asking you, based on your experience with what you've done and what you're doing with clients right now, what would be your top tips for anyone that's listening to you right now that's potentially thinking of selling next year or in a few years? What's the top advice, top tips?
My top tip is planning ahead. Have a legal advisor, a tax advisor, and an agent that will walk along with you during the entire process, and you will take the informed decisions. And this way, you will prevent any unpleasant surprise by the end of your sale regarding the taxes, regarding the documentation, or regarding the retentions that are made before completion.
I mean, I think that's a perfect overview of the selling cost. And sort of to finish up, I will tell you guys, if you're watching this and you're interested in having more information, first of all, if you have any questions for Andrea, go ahead and comment those below. We'll be happy to get back to you guys. But we will also, Andrea, leave your contact details in the description of this video. So if you guys would like to reach out to Andrea and ask her about, selling or anything regarding property in Spain, to go ahead and property sales or property, let's say, legal services, you can contact Andrea. And I think, that's a perfect moment for our High Homes tradition, which is rapid fire. You know what rapid fire is?
Yes, of course I do.
So we've prepared, we want to basically show the audience a bit more of the real side of our guests.
Let's do it.
So I've got rapid fire for you here, and Luna has sent that over to me. Luna, have you sent it over to me? Okay, so it's time for rapid fire, Andrea. I'm going to throw 2 options to you, right? One or the other, and you have to choose which option is more of, what option you would choose, okay?
Perfect.
So the whole idea is it needs to be fast. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. ¿Tapas o paella?
Tapas.
Beach walk or mountain hike?
Beach walk.
¿Sangría o tinto de verano?
Tinto de verano.
¿Jamón ibérico o queso manchego?
Jamón ibérico.
¿Pil pil o espeto?
Pil pil.
¿Siesta o sobremesa?
Sobremesa.
Modern new build or Andalusian style property?
Andalusian style.
And the last one. Andrea, if you had to choose one Spanish dish, and that's the only dish you can eat for the rest of your life, what Spanish dish would it be?
Jamón serrano.
Oh, that's an amazing one. Andrea, thank you so much for coming
Thank you, Kian.
onto the channel. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
For you guys watching this, I hope you enjoyed this content. Like always, if you did enjoy the video, if it was useful, which is what we want to make sure that we're providing useful videos, useful content, press that like button so we know that the video was useful. And if you're new to this space and you want to stay posted with content regarding Spanish real estate, Spanish lifestyle, property information, and much more, don't be shy and press that button, subscribe to the High Homes YouTube channel. And if you want to stay posted and notified every time a video comes out, press the bell button. Andrea, let's say bye to them. Hasta luego, guys.
Adiós.
Ciao.